There's a particular sound a breaking mug makes. It's not quite a crash, not quite a clink. It's something in between. A sharp, hollow thunk followed by silence, the kind of silence where you immediately know something's wrong. That sound echoed through my kitchen at 7:14 a.m. on a Wednesday. I was already running late. The kettle had boiled over. I'd burned my toast, barely shaved, and the shirt I wanted to wear had a mysterious stain on the sleeve that looked suspiciously like ketchup. My morning had been a slow-moving catastrophe, and then I reached for the wrong mug. It slipped from my hand and hit the counter edge. That was all it took. It bounced once, spun like a coin, and shattered into 4 distinct pieces on the tiled floor. It wasn't just any mug. It was his mug. Light blue, with a goofy-looking cartoon dinosaur on the side and the name BEAN written in wonky capital letters underneath. A Father's Day gift from when he was maybe 5. Bought at a school fundraiser, if I recall right. It had survived dishwashers, 2 moves, and 1 kitchen renovation. Until now. I stood there, barefoot, staring at the shards like I'd just dropped something sacred, which I guess I had. Funny how you don't realize the weight of something until it breaks. I'd seen that mug every single day for the past decade, used it more often than not. It was chipped, slightly stained on the inside, and had this tiny hairline crack near the handle that I always meant to fix. But it was mine. His, really. Ours. And now it lay in pieces. I bent down slowly, picking up the largest shard, careful not to cut myself. My fingers hesitated over the piece with the dinosaur's face still smiling, mockingly, maybe. I felt something sting at the back of my eyes. Ridiculous, right? Getting emotional over a cheap novelty mug. But it wasn't the mug. Not really. It was what it carried, what it meant. That mug was the first gift Ben gave me that didn't come from his mother's guidance. He'd picked it out himself. Told the story a dozen times, how he chose it because dinosaurs are strong and you make the best cereal, Daddy. He doesn't say things like that anymore. He's 20 now, in college, tall, quiet, always with his headphones in when he visits, talks more with his mom, or with the dog. We still get along, don't get me wrong, but it's different. Like we're in 2 different phases of a conversation we started years ago but forgot how to continue. I swept the pieces into a dish towel and placed them on the counter like a makeshift memorial. For a moment, the house felt too quiet. Not in a peaceful way, but in that aching sort of way you feel when you walk into a room expecting someone and they're not there. I looked around. The fridge still had his 3rd-grade drawing magneted to it. Some odd stick figure family where we all had triangle heads. There was a dent in the baseboard from when he rammed his toy fire truck into the wall over and over, and I'd said, he'll grow out of it, and he did. I didn't. I never grew out of missing the little boy who left notes under his pillow for me to find. That's what this whole thing is really about. The mug was just the key that opened the door to a room I hadn't visited in a long time. A room filled with quiet guilt, old laughter, and memories I've kept boxed up for reasons I couldn't explain until now. Maybe it's time I started unpacking. Or, at the very least, swept the floor properly and stopped pretending it was just a mug. It was never just a mug. It was a reminder that I was someone's father, and that maybe, just maybe, I still am. The attic is the last place you go when you're looking for something real. It's the final drawer in the dresser of the house, too hot in the summer, too cold in the winter, and always smelling like cardboard and dust. It's where things go when you don't want to throw them away, but also don't want to see them every day. And that's where I found myself, standing on the 3rd rung of a shaky old stepladder, flashlight clamped between my teeth, searching for a box I hadn't touched in years. I did go up there because of the mug. Not directly, anyway, but that morning had stuck with me. I couldn't shake it. The way it broke, the way I reacted. It opened something up inside me, a slow, gnawing kind of ache. I remembered we'd kept some of Ben's old things up here. Drawings, toys, baby clothes. A few things we couldn't part with. And maybe, just maybe, a letter or 2. Boxes were stacked like little memories in piles, some labeled in black marker, Xmas lights, winter jackets, BEN, school. That last one caught my eye. I pulled it toward me and opened it. Inside, a mess of construction paper, broken crayons, and that unmistakable smell of elementary school. I found a Mother's Day card made of glued macaroni, a tiny plastic fireman badge, a drawing of what I think was meant to be a dragon but looked more like a green potato with wings. And near the bottom, envelopes, 7 of them, all sealed, all labeled in my handwriting, to Ben, age 1, to Ben, age 3, and so on. I had forgotten I wrote them. The plan, back then, was simple. Every birthday, I'd write him a letter, something short, just thoughts, a moment, a hope, a fear. The kind of thing I wished my father had written to me. But I never gave them to him, not one. I told myself I'd wait until he was older, until he could appreciate them. Then I told myself he didn't need them. Then I just stopped writing them altogether. I sat on the attic floor, the box beside me, the flashlight dimming. I opened the first letter, the one from when he turned 1. It was clumsy, sentimental. I talked about how he cried when I tried to shave in the morning, how he'd grab the razor out of my hand and scream until I made a silly face. I wrote, "I don't know what I'm doing, Ben, but I love you more than I thought I could love anything, and I'm trying, God, I'm trying." I read that sentence over and over. God, I'm trying. I still am. I opened the rest. Each one a snapshot of who I was, and who I wanted to be for him. Some letters were playful, some nervous. One, from when he was 5, ended with, "I hope someday you'll understand why I'm not always good at this." I think he already does. I put the letters back in the box, not out of shame, not anymore, just not yet. He'll get them, one day, when I find the words to go with them. When I find the courage. Or maybe when I write one more letter, one that starts with, "I'm sorry I waited this long." Bright and sterile, but somehow still gloomy. I remember sitting in a cracked vinyl chair under a buzzing fluorescent light, trying to breathe like everyone had told me. Slow, steady, in through the nose, out through the mouth. I wasn't the one giving birth, of course, but I was just as terrified. The nurse had kicked me out of the delivery room about 15 minutes earlier. Something about monitors and repositioning and give her some space. I didn't argue. I just stood there with my hands in my jacket pockets, heart hammering in my throat. I remember checking the vending machine even though I wasn't hungry. I bought a bottle of water just to have something to hold, anything to feel useful. And then I heard it. The cry. Thin at first, then louder, then unmistakably human, raw, urgent. A sound full of everything. Protest, confusion, demand, life. My knees buckled just a little. I didn't cry. Not then. I just stood there frozen, water bottle in hand, trying to understand that a new person had entered the world, a person who was mine. Half me. A whole life, freshly begun. I didn't know what to do with that. When they let me back into the room, she was holding him. His face was red and wrinkled, his eyes sealed shut. He looked angry, like he was already disappointed in me. And I remember thinking, I don't know how to be your father. I said it out loud, too, whispered, really, more to myself than anyone else. But she heard it. You don't have to know, she said, tired but smiling. You just have to try. Trying sounded manageable. Doing, terrifying. The nurse handed him to me. I didn't know how to hold a newborn, how to cradle the head, how to support the neck. I'd seen it on YouTube once, but couldn't recall anything useful. My hands shook. And then he opened his eyes. Just for a second, long enough for me to feel like I'd been pulled into something ancient and enormous, like the whole weight of humanity had passed through those eyes and landed right on my shoulders. I told myself I'd be better than my father, that I'd show up, that I'd say the things that needed saying, that I wouldn't be cold, or absent, or disappointed. It's a promise I made without knowing how hard it would be to keep. The truth is, I was scared of him from the beginning, not because he cried or fussed or needed things I didn't understand, but because he was watching me. Even as a baby, I felt his gaze. Every time I raised my voice at home, I'd check to see if he noticed. Every time I left too early or came home too tired, I wondered what version of me he was building in his mind. Was I the man who tucked him in, or the man who forgot he had a soccer game? Was I the dad who made waffles shaped like dinosaurs on Saturday mornings, or the dad who stared at his phone at dinner? Probably both. That first night, I sat in the hospital chair holding him while his mother slept. I didn't sleep at all. I just watched his chest rise and fall, like the softest wave brushing the edge of the world. And I whispered to him the only thing I knew for certain. "I'm here, Ben. I'm here." I didn't promise to be perfect. I didn't promise to always get it right. I didn't even promise to be brave. Just that I was there. And I think that mattered. At least, I hope it did. They don't tell you how loud silence can be when you're a new father. There were nights when Ben wouldn't cry, not a peep. And those nights scared me more than the ones where he screamed himself breathless. Because at least the crying meant he was there, alive, present, needing me. But when it was quiet, my mind filled in the blanks. Was he breathing? Did I swaddle him too tight? Should I check again? I'd tiptoe to his crib, heart pounding like I was sneaking into a crime scene. I'd hover my hand over his chest, waiting for that tiny rise and fall. Sometimes I'd touch his blanket just to be sure. Then I'd slip back to bed and lie awake anyway, ears tuned to a silence that felt like a trap. The truth is, I didn't know how to feel confident in any of it. I read the books, I watched the videos, I asked the questions I thought I was supposed to ask. But deep down, I felt like I was pretending to be a dad, like I'd been handed a role I hadn't auditioned for, and the director had left the building. My wife, God bless her, was a natural. Not perfect, no, but present in a way I struggled to be. She seemed to know what each cry meant. She kept the rhythm of it all in her bones. I was always half a beat behind. And I hated that. I wanted to be involved. Truly, I wanted to be the kind of father who woke up joyfully at 2 a.m. to change diapers and hum lullabies in the dark. I tried. But something inside me always held back. A hesitation. A fear that I'd mess up so badly they'd both be better off without my input. So instead, I lingered at the doorway. I hovered. I fetched things. I watched more than I acted. I told myself I was giving her space, that I didn't want to interfere. But the truth is, I was afraid of holding something that fragile, and being the reason it broke. I remember one morning, I tried to dress him for daycare while she was running late. He wriggled, wailed, arched his back like a cat in a thunderstorm. I couldn't get the onesie on. I snapped one of the buttons wrong. He screamed louder, and I just froze. I stood there, holding this tiny flailing body, and felt so defeated, useless, angry at myself. She came in, calm as ever, took him gently from my arms, and within seconds he was calm again. It felt like the most painful magic I'd ever witnessed. I wanted to shout, "How do you do that?" But I already knew the answer. She wasn't afraid. I was. And that fear, it didn't go away. It just changed shapes. It moved from cribs to car seats, from sippy cups to screen time. Every new phase brought a new anxiety. Was I too strict? Too soft? Too distant? Sometimes I'd look at him when he wasn't looking at me, watch him line up his toys or hum while coloring, or drift off in the back seat, and wonder, does he feel safe with me? Or just around me? I didn't know. I still don't. Being a father isn't just about presence. It's about vulnerability, and I wasn't good at that part. Not then. I kept so many of my worries to myself. I thought that was strength. But silence isn't always noble. Sometimes it's just fear in disguise. And I carried that fear with me, like a stone in my pocket. Every day, every night. Hoping one day I'd figure out how to put it down. It started with a folded piece of paper and a red crayon. I found it one morning tucked beneath Ben's pillow. He was maybe 5 at the time, small enough that he still wore pajama sets with dinosaurs on them, big enough to insist on choosing which ones. The note was simple. Scrawled in his crooked handwriting, all caps, "Do you like spaghetti? ORMACARONEEBETR." No name, no explanation, just a question, hidden like treasure. At first, I laughed. I assumed it was meant for his mom, but when I asked her, she shook her head. He said it was secret, that it was for the pillow game. I asked what that meant. She didn't know either. So that night I answered back. On a scrap of printer paper I wrote macaroni with cheese. Extra cheesy. I folded it carefully, wrote nothing on the outside, and slipped it under his pillow while he was brushing his teeth. The next morning, his eyes were wide. You found it? I did. And you wrote back? I did. He beamed, not just smiled, beamed, like he discovered a hidden door in the world. From then on, it became a ritual. Not every night, not even every week, but often enough to feel like ours. A private thread sewn through the blur of busy schedules and early bedtimes. He'd ask things, silly things. What is your favorite superpower? Or would you rather be a tiger or a spaceship? Sometimes he'd tell me secrets. I don't like when Tim takes my green marker. He always takes the green. And I'd reply, always. Sometimes with jokes, sometimes with advice. Once, after a particularly tough day at work, I just wrote, "Today was hard, but your note made it better." He didn't mention that one aloud the next day, but that night there was a new note waiting. "Do you want me to draw you a picture? I will if you want." I still have that drawing, a purple bear wearing sunglasses. I keep it in my wallet. It's funny, the things that build connection. We think it has to be grand gestures, vacations, lectures, heart-to-hearts over campfires. But sometimes it's just a piece of paper, folded under a pillow, a quiet promise, I see you, I hear you, you matter. And it wasn't just for him. Those notes reminded me that even when I felt like I was failing, I was still showing up. That maybe I didn't need to be the loudest or the boldest. Maybe I just needed to be reachable, writable to, someone who would answer. We never really talked about when the notes stopped. Life got busier. He got older. The questions changed from, do bears like pizza, to can I borrow the car? But I still think about those nights, the little ritual, the secret game. And sometimes I wonder if, in his dorm room now, he remembers it too. If he ever thinks about slipping a question under his own pillow. And what kind of answer he hopes to find. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't some dramatic moment, no fight, no slammed door, or final message scrawled in crayon. It was slower than that, quieter. Like a song, fading out before you realize it's over. One night, there just wasn't a note. And the next night, there wasn't one either. At first, I figured he forgot, or fell asleep early, or maybe just had nothing to ask that night. But days became weeks, and then months. I kept checking under the pillow for a while, just in case. Then eventually, I stopped. And I told myself it was normal. Kids grow up. Their interests change. They stop leaving notes, stop needing bedtime stories, stop asking questions you can answer. But that didn't make the silence feel any less loud. Ben was around 11 or 12 when it happened. That strange in-between age where the world starts pulling kids away from you. Friends become more important. Privacy becomes a currency. And suddenly, the kid who used to shout your name when you walked in the door barely looks up from his game. We still talked. About school. About homework. About whether he wanted ketchup on his burger. But the deep stuff, the little windows into his world, those were gone. And I didn't know how to get him back. I tried a few things. Jokes. Weekend outings. One afternoon, I even left a note under his pillow. Still like macaroni. He never mentioned it. I found it crumpled by the side of the bed a week later. That one stung. I told myself not to take it personally. That he was growing. That it was part of the deal. But deep down I wondered if I'd lost something. Or worse, if I'd missed my chance to hold on to it. There was a shift in our house, too. Not bad, just different. He was moodier, quieter, sometimes sharp, sometimes shut down entirely. I remember one evening, we were in the car, coming back from his friend's place. I asked how the visit went. He shrugged. I pressed. He sighed. I pressed again. And he snapped. Why do you care? 3 words. Simple. but they knocked the air out of me. I didn't yell. I didn't scold. I just went quiet. We rode the rest of the way home in silence. I kept thinking because I do, because I always have. But saying it then would have sounded like a defense, and I didn't want love to feel like something I had to argue for. So I waited, gave space. Tried not to smother him. I figured, maybe if I backed off, he'd come back around. That's the thing no one tells you about fatherhood. So much of it is waiting. Not for the big milestones, but for little cracks of light. A question. A laugh. A moment of openness. And when they come, you grab them. Hold them gently. Pray they don't vanish too quickly. But sometimes they do. Sometimes the notes stop, and they don't come back. Not for years. And all you can do is keep your side of the pillow open. Just in case. Packing for college was supposed to feel like an accomplishment. It was supposed to be one of those proud parent moments, the kind you see in commercials. Mom snapping pictures, dad giving overly serious advice about laundry and locking doors. Laughter, maybe a tear or two, a final hug. But in our house, it felt more like a quiet exhale, like we'd both been holding our breath for a long time, and neither of us was sure how to let it out. The week before he left, we circled each other like two people trying not to trip over invisible wires. I offered help. He waved me off. He made piles of clothes on his floor, moved them, remade them, packed and unpacked twice. The suitcase sat open in the corner of his room, slowly filling with pieces of his life. I tried to be useful. I folded socks. I labeled cables. I reminded him about chargers, documents, raincoats. But mostly I hovered, watched. He didn't ask me to stop. He didn't tell me to leave. But he didn't ask me to stay either. On the night before we drove him to campus, he was up late, reorganizing everything. I lingered at the doorway, unsure if I was allowed to step in. Then he looked up and said, "Can you help me find that little gray bag, the one I used for camp?" It was a stupid thing, really. A nylon bag with a busted zipper and a faded logo. But he wanted it, and I knew where it was. Upstairs, hall closet, back corner, behind an old toolbox. I brought it down, handed it to him, and for the first time in days, he looked me in the eyes. "Thanks," he said, quiet, real. I nodded, said nothing. I didn't trust my voice. The next morning was a blur of checklists and duffel bags, campus maps, parking passes, orientation packets. His mother got teary. I pretended not to notice. He hugged her long and tight. And then he turned to me. I braced for a handshake, or a quick, awkward back-pat hug. But instead, he stepped in and wrapped both arms around me, firm, honest. He hadn't hugged me like that in years. He said, "I packed something for you. It's under your pillow." I didn't know what to say. I think I just nodded. He smiled, then turned and walked toward the dorm. He didn't look back. I didn't check the pillow until that night. I waited until the house was quiet again. Until his room looked too clean and the fridge wasn't missing his favorite snacks and the dog kept sniffing his bedroom door. I lifted the pillow, and there it was. A plain white envelope, my name on the front in his handwriting. I held it for a long time before opening it. Not because I was afraid. Because I already knew that whatever it said, it would matter more than I was ready for. I didn't open the envelope right away. Not because I was afraid of what it might say, though maybe a little of that was there, but because I wanted to savor the moment, to let the silence stretch, to hold onto that fragile space between us. Eventually, I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out the letter inside. It was folded carefully, the paper slightly creased from handling. His handwriting was neat, but with that unmistakable teenage edge, sometimes careful, sometimes rushed. I unfolded it and began to read. Dad, I don't know if I ever said this out loud or if I ever really meant it, but thank you. Thank you for trying, even when it was hard. For sticking around even when I made it difficult. For all the little things you did that I probably didn't notice. I'm not perfect. I know I've been distant, maybe too distant. But I'm learning, trying to figure out who I am, who I want to be. You've been a part of that, whether you realize it or not. I hope someday we can talk about all the stuff we never did. The mistakes, the silences, the things we didn't say. But for now, I wanted you to know that you matter. To me. Ben. I sat there, letter in hand, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the heater. I read it again, and again. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something shift inside me, something light, something hopeful. That letter, simple as it was a bridge, a quiet reaching out, an olive branch wrapped in paper. I folded it carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and slid it under my own pillow. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But I knew one thing for certain. That letter was a beginning. I didn't open the envelope right away. Not because I was afraid of what it might say, though maybe a little of that was there, but because I wanted to savor the moment, to let the silence stretch, to hold onto that fragile space between us. Eventually, I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out the letter inside. It was folded carefully, the paper slightly creased from handling. His handwriting was neat, but with that unmistakable teenage edge, sometimes careful, sometimes rushed. I unfolded it and began to read. Dad, I don't know if I ever said this out loud or if I ever really meant it, but thank you. Thank you for trying, even when it was hard. For sticking around even when I made it difficult. For all the little things you did that I probably didn't notice. I'm not perfect. I know I've been distant. Maybe too distant. But I'm learning, trying to figure out who I am, who I want to be. You've been a part of that, whether you realize it or not. I hope someday we can talk about all the stuff we never did. The mistakes, the silences, the things we didn't say. But for now, I wanted you to know that you matter. To me. Ben. I sat there, letter in hand, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the heater. I read it again, and again. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something shift inside me, something light, something hopeful. That letter, simple as it was a bridge, a quiet reaching out, an olive branch wrapped in paper. I folded it carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and slid it under my own pillow. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But I knew one thing for certain. That letter was a beginning. There's a moment in every relationship when you realize that words sometimes fall short, that no matter how much you want to fix things with a heartfelt speech or a big gesture, the true healing happens in silence, in the quiet understanding that you both carry, like a shared secret. After Ben left for college, our conversations became less frequent. Life pulled us in different directions. He had classes, new friends, late-night study sessions. I had work, bills, the daily grind. But despite the distance, I felt a growing need to reach out, to bridge the gap that had stretched between us over the years. I sent texts, simple ones at first. How's your week? Or remember to eat. Sometimes he'd reply with a short message, sometimes not at all. I learned to be patient. To accept that his silence wasn't rejection, just part of the growing up process. One weekend, I decided to visit him unannounced. I wasn't sure what to expect, if he'd be happy, annoyed, or indifferent. But when he opened the door, the look in his eyes told me everything. Surprise. Hesitation. Then, slowly, a genuine smile. We sat on the couch in his small apartment, surrounded by textbooks and takeout containers. The conversation was awkward at first, stilted, careful. But as the evening wore on, the words started to flow more naturally. He talked about his classes, his new friends, his doubts about the future. I listened. Without interrupting. Without judgment. At one point, he looked at me and said, "I'm sorry for shutting you out. I guess I didn't know how to say what I was feeling." I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "I'm sorry, too, for not being there the way you needed." We didn't exchange grand apologies or promises to be perfect. Instead, we shared a quiet moment of understanding. A recognition that love isn't flawless. It's messy, complicated, and sometimes silent. That visit marked a new chapter in our relationship. Not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because we both started showing up imperfectly, openly, and honestly. And that, I think, is what fatherhood is really about. Thank you for listening to this story. If it reminded you of someone or of something you felt but never said, I hope you carry that with you a little longer. And if this one resonated, I invite you to stick around. There are more stories, some lighter, some heavier, but all of them real, just like this one. Because sometimes hearing someone else's story is exactly what helps us understand our own.